Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in.
So today we are talking about something that has kind of taken entertainment by storm, and it's a little controversial: artificial intelligence in entertainment.
Yeah, it's in the news again. It seems to come. It comes and goes and comes and goes. I remember in 2001, the Final Fantasy, they did a feature-length movie called The Spirits Within, and they had full CGI actors, basically, computer-generated movie. But everyone said this is it. They're never going to have actors in films again. They're all going to be computer-generated, and of course that didn't happen. But today, they're still doing CG movies and CG. They're replacing characters in movies. So when artificial intelligence, I guess, is what part of that is artificially intelligent?
Well, first let's start with defining what is artificial intelligence. According to builtin.com, artificial intelligence, or AI, so we'll probably just call it AI from here on out, is a wide-ranging branch of computer science concerned with building smart machines capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence. So it actually goes all the way back to the 1950s. I didn't know that. Starting with the question of, can computers think? And that's what AI is. It's basically, can computers think like humans can? And can we put them in those tasks to kind of free up humans for other things, I guess?
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of what Hollywood does is it tries to replace people in the workflow with computers. It's done it for decades, ever since they started.
Well, that's any industry trying to replace humans in the workflow.
Absolutely, but I mean, even since Final Draft came out, and that was in 1995, that made things a lot easier, and you didn't have to spend so much time on the physical process of typing scripts. I'm sure there were a lot of people who lost jobs as script typists when that happened. I actually have a freelance client who had me working on a project for a company that's doing. They basically take audio from people and put it into an artificially intelligent computer and analyzes the audio, and then it can recreate that voice saying like anything, and you can't tell the difference. Whether it's the original person or if it's a generated thing. Literally, if you had this technology, you could have if you had enough actor audio of a particular actor, you could create a realistic audio performance by that person without them actually being there.
Let's put a pin in that, because there's an interesting phenomenon happening right now in the industry that I wonder if it'll eventually tie into AI and ethics. So we'll put a pin in that particular part of this conversation. But I mean, you're seeing it everywhere, honestly. Like, we've talked a little bit on the show about AI actors. There's an AI actor that we just found out about who's got 3 million followers, and she signed to one of the top agencies. AI is used to write scripts and songs. I'm an audiobook narrator, and my mentor actually is like, she goes, it's coming. Give it 10, 15 years, and they're going to do AI narrators. They already are. But there are some drawbacks to having an AI script or an AI song, or even, I would argue, an AI actor.
Well, yeah, I watch a lot of YouTube these days, and there's quite a few videos now that use, I don't know if it's AI, but they're using computer-generated narration. And I don't know if that's being just, them taking their script and having, just text-to-speech read it, or if there is some sort of built-in function somewhere, like you put a video into a system and it listens to the video and generates the narration for you. I'm sure there's something like that.
Oh, I've heard those. They sound horrible.
They sound horrible. They're too stilted. And I immediately turn them off when I hear them. I'm like, I can't listen to that.
Yeah. I mean, so we had a little bit of fun doing the research for this show. Tom found a website that you could do an AI song, and we both put in the subject of cats. We got different lyrics. But one thing that was interesting, and this is something I mentioned to you off podcast, it follows the formula. It's not a good song, but it follows the formula. And I would argue even with scripts, like that one that you sent me, we can put in the show notes. I forgot the name of it.
Sunspring?
I don't remember, whatever it was you sent me. I started watching it and I couldn't get into it because the language was so stilted, but it followed the formula,
Yeah,
you
Sunspring
know?
was the AI written short film a few years back that it freaked all the writers in Hollywood out. But it was kind of a horrible film, but it kind of got like a little cult following that it was kind of like not so bad it's good kind of thing, but just so it's so kind of a weird dialogue, weird structure that it's
Yeah,
kind of interesting to watch
yeah.
and kind of scary to watch.
I mean, I think the issue is, I get why they would want it. Yes, it saves money, it saves time, but at the same time, what it's missing is that human element. I mean, it is the human experience and that heart behind it. So, yeah, you can have a formulaic script, but you don't have, AI, unless you somehow program it, is not gonna know what it's like growing up poor and, on the streets of Detroit or something like that. Like, it won't have
Yeah.
that kind of heart behind it,
Hmm.
and when it does, that's when we're in trouble.
Yeah, otherwise it's just kind of like I found one plot generator, script generator website online that is almost like a Mad Libs, and you fill out all these little boxes of your character and the locations and the situation, and then it actually spit out like I don't know a 5-page script for this film on what's the some kind of weird monster thing, but it doesn't exactly make sense. You can, and that's the whole point of Mad Libs. Mad Libs are funny because you throw in random words and it comes out funny. Until the formula behind it understands, the purpose for things and the context of things, it can't actually produce something that makes sense. That so it doesn't have that logical structure yet.
I mean, what do you think? How do you feel about it all?
Well, I think it's all very interesting. I mean, I'm trying to work on a script now, and the first draft is always the hardest thing. And I feel like if I could just like talk for like a half hour about the story, about the script, about the characters, and have a computer grind it all up and say, "Oh, this is what you're trying to get at," and spit out like the first draft, and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at." It kind of would take the that first round of garbage draft off of my brain and give me something to start rewriting on. Because I don't know about you, but I actually think rewriting's more fun than writing.
The first draft is always the worst.
Yeah. If you had something, rough that you could polish instead of having to kind of fight through that whole thing, like spend weeks or whatever, writing that first draft. If you could have it in like 5 minutes and then start rewriting, that would be a huge time savings and a lot less stress.
But here's a question. Would you use that program if it meant you had to share credit?
Right. Who owns that? Who gets the story credit then? Who gets the
Mhm.
writing credit? Because you obviously didn't write the whole thing. At least, you'd be partially responsible for it.
I mean, like, would it be like you buy this AI program and you get a license for a year, or is it they get a cut of everything you write or every song you make or every film or whatever? That's an
Yeah, I
interesting
don't know.
question. I don't know if they've really
There are
discussed
s-
that one.
yeah, there are some other story idea programs which I haven't really used, but I've heard about them where they help you organize your ideas and they do it in like a question and answer kind of scenario. So, these go back to just regular old Word documents, like when you're building character profiles, asking you questions about your character to help you understand it more. So if it's a computer doing it, that's now artificially intelligent, but you have to feed it the information to start with.
That would be more like an assistant, though. That's like using Siri or something in a way.
That's true. Assistants, you can call it an assistant, but a lot of assistants have artificial intelligence already. I mean, that's what Siri is. Siri's listening to your question and trying to give you an answer. And the fact that it's still a developing technology is why you get such weird responses sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, people have a lot of fun asking Siri weird questions. I'll do that sometimes when I'm bored. I'm like, I wonder what I can get her to say.
I mean, it's as simple as like dictation software, not understanding they, their kind of thing and
Mhm.
having to go back and correct that. It has to understand the full sentence to understand, the context, to understand which version of that word you're using, or just understanding the context of the sentence to understand the words you're using and make sure, it's not, if you're using the word fish, but you're not talking about fishing, then maybe the word is wish, not fish, that kind of thing. It just heard it wrong.
Mhm. So you're not averse to using AI writing software or something like that. How do you feel about CGI'd and AI'd actors?
I think it's kind of cool. I mean, actors have a limited amount of time and resources to their, available to them. And one of these things about that audio voice thing I was reading about is that you could actually license your likeness or your voice to do endorsements without having to actually do the endorsement. I mean, you might want to approve what it's going to include, but you wouldn't have to actually go to a studio and do the recording because they would just program it and then you'd still get paid for it, but you wouldn't have to actually do it. I guess, that's a question for kind of legality wise. Right now, I think there's certain, in the US at least, there's certain rules about endorsements. Like if you endorse a product, you actually have to use it. If you just license out your voice to do that, does that fall under the same rules? Would your fans feel cheated if they found out that you were endorsing products but not actually doing the endorsement?
I actually would have to argue with you. I don't believe you have to use the product to endorse it. It might depend on the product and on the contract, but that's like a whole nother thing. I do find it interesting that you are like all about the tech because I'm actually really hesitant. I mean, and I say that partly as an actor. So going back to the earlier part of the conversation, do you follow much about what's going on with the union, non-union stuff in terms of like acting, the acting world, or probably not really?
Only what you tell me.
Only what I tell you. Okay. So follow me through. This is a little bit long, but I promise you it does have a point as far as how AI might eventually play into this. So when I first moved out here, I took this commercial class with a guy who basically made his fortune off of doing commercials in the 90s. And you could do that in the 90s because a lot of commercials were under SAG's jurisdiction. And how that works for people who aren't familiar with those contracts, basically, when you do a SAG commercial, you get paid for being there on set for the day, and then you get paid residuals off of the run of the commercial. Most commercials are like a 13-week run. So you're getting paid, let's say, $500 for being there on set on that day, and then you're getting paid like however many times they run that commercial in the 13 weeks. Let's say they run it a ton, you get like $1,000. Woohoo! If they run it again for another 13 weeks, they have to renegotiate with you. If they shelve it and run it again in a year for another 13 weeks, they have to renegotiate with you. You get paid every time they run that commercial for the 13 weeks. Fast forward to where we are now in the 2010s and beyond, non union contracts have been taking over the commercial world. This is why SAG was getting so upset and why a lot of SAG commercial actors were getting so upset. Non union says, well, we'll pay you for the day and we'll do a buyout. We're not going to pay you residuals for the commercial. So you get paid the $500 for the day. They'll give you a $1,000 buyout. They'll run it for 13 weeks. Then maybe they want to run it for another 13 weeks. They don't have to pay you residuals on that. Maybe they shelve it for a year and then they run it again. They don't have to pay you for that. So people were getting upset about the money. But there's also a really interesting thing that's been coming up in non union commercial contracts and in other contracts as well, like in voiceover and stuff like that. This is something my agent really hammered home with me, and it's the perpetuity clause. So, what that means is with the SAG contracts, they have to keep coming back to you to say, hey, can we use this? Can we use this? Non union contracts say, we're going to buy you out in perpetuity. We have your footage, so we can use it forever and we don't have to ask you again. That's what the in perpetuity is. We have it forever. We can do what we want with it. Now, 9 times out of 10, my agent would tell me it's probably not something to worry about. But what if like a bigger company buys out this, whoever has your commercial footage and you become a big celebrity? Now they can say they have a celebrity endorsement, right? And use your commercial over and over and over and you're not getting paid. But what I wonder, if they have that perpetuity clause, what's to stop them from taking your image and your voice and putting you in another commercial of theirs?
Ah,
And
yeah.
that worries me because the ethics of it, you don't know.
Right. So artists, even writers, need to own their kind of their creative skill to be able to use their likeness and their words and their voice. Because
And
if
read
I,
your
yeah,
contract.
right. If I was under contract with a studio for say I'm Bruce Willis and I've done Die Hard for gazillion years, and they decide to do another Die Hard movie, but this time they're going to CG it, and they're going to use this audio technology to do all the dialogue. Well, do they have to pay Bruce Willis this $10 million because they already have a contract with him, quote unquote, in perpetuity? Can they just recreate him? This kind of came up when they started doing those holograms too, with like Michael Jackson.
Well, I'm not familiar. What happened?
Well, they have this technology to recreate people from 2D video as 3D holograms, and they have Michael Jackson perform somewhere. I mean, long after he was dead, on stage as a hologram.
Yeah, but I'm asking, was there a scandal attached to that? Because I don't
Oh,
recall.
I don't know. There was a scandal, but it
Okay.
brought up a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Who owns the rights to your likeness and that kind of thing. And suddenly, that was a programmed performance. So I don't know if it was done with motion capture, then putting the hologram over someone else doing the dancing or whatever, or if it was all generated based on footage he had previously done. I don't know which way leans which way in the legal aspect. But
Mhm.
the idea is that if you can mimic someone's voice and likeness, can you contract that? You can contract an actor to work for you and say, okay, you're going to work this many days and you're going to do this script and whatever. But can you license someone's likeness and voice to then say, we're going to do 5 years of productions and you don't even have to show up?
I mean, like, on the surface, it sounds great, but at the same time, so for example, I know we had the whole Paul Walker thing and Carrie Fisher thing, and I
Right.
believe their estates gave permission. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually if you're with an agent, you can tell your agency, I won't do nudity, I won't do tobacco commercials or something. But if they CGI you, maybe they could make you naked on film, even if
Mm-hmm.
you always had a no nudity rider, or they can have you smoking or something that you didn't want them to have you do. You have to wonder about. I mean, that's why I'm saying I'm sure there's
Right.
gonna be clauses and riders and stuff like that to overrule that, but, like, if you're dead and your estate doesn't care,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
The thing goes one step beyond just looking like you, though. In the case of the audio software that I was working on the project for, it actually can carry on a conversation too. It's not just reading text and sounding like a person. Guess I should have clarified that before. It can actually also, it has the AI to actually also carry on the conversation. So it would feel like real time conversation, like you and me talking, but I'd be talking to, Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or whoever it was. And I wouldn't know that it wasn't them because they would respond based on all the recordings of all their conversations and understanding that what they said, being able to respond in the like way. So if you asked Joe Biden about his dog and he's like, "Oh, the dog's fine. He's back at the house now." Because it read the news stories about the dog biting someone in the White House and then being sent home to the, Delaware or wherever it was. That goes even now that AI is becoming the actor. Like it's actually doing the performance. So in the case of acting, it wouldn't be just using your likeness and using your voice. It would be having the computer do the acting. So it wouldn't even be someone doing motion capture even. It would just be all in the computer.
Oh my gosh, but can you imagine the ethical ramifications of that as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You could make have a, I mean with McQuella, I guess is the CGI actress on Instagram with 3 million followers. In her case, I don't know if she's done any video yet, but she's actually out there influencing and getting paid to influence. What if that's a real person that's replaced that?
It was interesting. I was looking at that too and her amazing follower count. And I thought, again, if you're going to do AI actors, like, I mean, I'm not trying to get all Black Mirror here, but like, what if you just create them all to look a certain way? The beauty of how acting is going right now is they're finally embracing all different ages, races, body types, things like that. Well, what if you just have a bunch of CGI people who all look perfect?
No, you're right. If you're saying that way, you would know that they weren't real because they look too perfect.
Well, I'm just saying if you're like, "Let's have a whole movie of just CGI stock people,"
Oh.
they could all look I'm just saying, like, finally we're getting to a place where we're accepting different body types, and that was a big thing in Hollywood for years, right? Everyone looks so beautiful and perfect and
Mhm.
untouchable, and now we're finally getting to a place of realism. Are you gonna make realistic CGI people? Probably not. You can make them look like whatever you want, you know?
True.
So I'm just saying I guess I kind of fall on this side of, there's really gotta be a lot of laws and things in place. Like, one place I could maybe get behind it is if you were having a big crowd scene, like, say, Lord of the Rings, Helm's Deep scene, and you didn't wanna pay or bring in a bazillion people, fine. Do CGI background, or whatever. But even then, you're putting people out of work.
Mhm.
That's maybe a place I could get into it. I mean, it's gonna probably be more important for bigger celebrities, but what's to stop an average actor or an average Joe writer from signing away their likeness or their, intelligence or something for these things?
Mhm. What about the going back to the replacement part of it, like you said, like people losing jobs? If this,
Mhm.
Michaela, character, what if they had 6 of them and they all had their own personalities in the AI, they had their own looks, and suddenly you're creating, a Friends-like sitcom with no actors. It's all virtual actors. So you've basically you don't even need a set or crew. It's all computerized. You've gotten rid of 90% of the production cost.
I mean, you've put the production cost in a different place because
True.
somebody has to create the characters, but I know what you're saying.
Right. But once you've created the character, you know, they'll act 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and never stop.
I mean, and think of so you're saving not just on the acting fees, but you're saving on crafty, you're saving on maybe if you had to, bring them in from a different state, so you're saving on travel, you're saving on wardrobe, you're saving on makeup.
With computer generated video, like with the Mandalorian, have you seen how they've been doing that? With they call it the volume,
Mhm.
where the entire set is virtual. In that case, you wouldn't even need to have the virtual set to put the actors in. You would just create the virtual environment that looks so real that they don't even need to fake it because it looks so real. So now you've created any location you want, any character you want, any you can do time periods, you can do science fiction, you can create anything, and with the resolution and the processing we have now, it's no longer Polar Express Tom Hanks creepy people design. It's getting to be super super realistic. Carrie Fisher and what was the other one?
Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. Those are the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, people could probably still figure that those were not them, but they're getting really close. So once you have a TV show that's entire cast is virtual, is artificially intelligent, and the CG is so real that you can't tell the difference. That's, I think, the point at which a lot of Hollywood starts to freak out.
I would also argue, not just from a I'm the Black Mirror person in this scenario. You're like the, "Yeah, tech," and I'm like, "Oh, boy." But I would also argue this is just CGI actors now, but I guess it would also be CGI writer or CGI, but AI writers. There's a question of legacy. I
Mm,
mean, part of being human is that we live, we experience life, and we die. And whatever we did while we were on Earth, that is our legacy, and it does not it's carried on, but we don't keep doing stuff, you know what I mean? So, Carrie Fisher did the original Star Wars and, her other movies, and she wrote some books, and that's her legacy, and I would actually be really disturbed. I understand she was in the midst of filming when they did what was it? Last Jedi, that was the movie, right?
mhm,
I understand she was in the middle of filming that, and so, yeah, they wanted to finish out. But if they do another trilogy and she's in it, I would find that really disturbing because I know at a gut level she's no longer with us,
mhm.
you know?
Yeah, in some ways, we miss our favorite actors or celebrities, and it'd be great if they could come back. it's kind of like the hologram thing. Like they talked about doing a concert with Prince after he had died as the hologram. We all want that last time to see that person or that celebrity perform. But it's kind of the old saying, because we die, it makes life, have value. So
Mhm.
if you just continue somebody's existence virtually through AI and CG, does that cheapen their actual existence? And nobody wants to be the person who does that, to be, called out for that. And again, this business is also, we talk about, well, when we write, is also about the emotions of, what our lives have been and what we've been through, and that comes out in our stories. I wouldn't want to see a movie that was written by something that didn't have that feeling, like you said earlier, didn't have that experience to be real. I mean, it's kind of even just like when you have somebody who writes a story that they have no experience about in their own lives, unless they do the research, they're not going to really capture the essence of that story. It's the same with artificially generated, stories and scripts and characters. Can they really perform, authentically?
I don't know. I mean, would you
Yeah.
pay to see a feature film with a CGI actor in the lead?
That's the question, is what if somebody came out with a movie and it, like a new actor or a new show, and didn't tell you that everything on it was CG, but you loved it, and suddenly everyone's trying to chase down, who are these actors? Oh, I never heard of them before. What did they do before? But the studio set up like a fake IMDb page, or that kind of thing, to create the persona. Actually, the Al Pacino did a movie a while back called Simone, where he did that. And he was a producer who created an artificial actor and had to fake the whole thing, and it was a big scandal. And when it was revealed, how would that play out in the world? What if that came to light, that suddenly we found out that some of these actors or some of these shows we like, none of it's real.
I think ethically they would have to disclose somewhere that it's it's a CGI character. Just like if you were talking to Joe Biden, you right like you were saying the AI voice thing. I think they have to disclose somewhere that it's not really him and he's not authorized to make decisions of state, or you know what I,
Right.
because
Sure.
you could really get into a lot of trouble. And I mean, it sounds cool, but at the same time, like, for any of you out there who listen who aren't entrenched in Hollywood, how would you feel if a AI person took over your job? Like, I wouldn't like it. It's already tough enough out here, and now you're giving an AI job, or you're giving a acting job to an AI,
Hmm.
when I've been trying for how long? I wouldn't like it, and I would argue that anyone in any industry wouldn't like it either. How would you feel if you had an AI manager when you've been working for this company for 30 years? You
Hmm.
know? You wouldn't like it.
And it is already happening in the real world, with in journalism especially. They've got AI crafting news stories. Some people have already gone through what you're saying.
Which outlets? I didn't know that.
Bloomberg has a system. I'm trying to think. Washington Post has a system. Forbes has a system. They basically take, any kind of news story that's based on data or formulas, like sports, weather, and finances mainly, and it can generate reports based on that, because it knows
Mm.
the structure. This stock went up this percentage today, reacting on this information from the Fed, and this player hit this many home runs, which is their record. All those things can be data driven and formulaic. So they're writing robots basically.
But when it comes to, like, say, a sports feature article, that would not be AI, correct?
That would be much more difficult, yeah,
Yeah.
because you're getting into interviews and analysis
Human
and
emotion.
human emotions
Yeah.
and behind the scenes intrigue and stuff like that. Those things definitely take a little more, nuance.
Mhm. So where do you think it'll be in the future?
It's always with Hollywood, it's always the sky is falling all the time. So, and like I said, that one movie came out in 2001, and we have a lot of CG movies today, but we still use actors. And we still have live action movies. So I think it's a little overblown still. I think, especially writers, I think we're safe. I watched that Sunspring, that short film. It was AI written, and it's I don't think we're in any danger of being shut out.
Yet.
Well, it comes down to money. I mean, screenwriters are literally a dime a million in Hollywood, right? So why would you spend billions of dollars on the AI to write a movie when you can have, the old 1,000 monkeys in a room typing away, eventually kicking out Shakespeare, right? That's basically where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty fair assessment. I don't think it's a worry in our lifetime. I think it's something that will come up for the generations after us, like I'd say half a generation after. And I think they have to have a lot of like ethical discussions and legislature around it. Because I mean, again, this is getting Black Mirror, but can you imagine if you created some sort of AI personality and, like, they suddenly became a diva? You'd be like, "Dude, I created you," you know? I mean,
Uh-huh.
you it's one of those you really gotta be careful, or, people already are so sick of reboots and retellings and whatever, and if you end up writing a script by committee because it's based off of formula and people are like, "Oh my fricking word, that's even worse than when you were doing, the millionth reboot of Party of 5 or whatever." Like, they
Yeah.
really there's some other things I think that need to happen before they rely on AI to bring up Hollywood.
Yeah. No, I mean, they've already done that and they're doing it all the time, the committee, creation by committee kind of thing.
Mhm.
So how could creation by AI be any better or worse?
Awesome. Well, what do you guys all think? Let us know. You can tweet at us at WG Therapy. You can also find us online at writersgrouptherapy.com. We'll put everything that we sourced in the show notes, and we will talk to you guys again soon.